morning to you from the town of Lowestoft. You can see possibly in front of me, it looks like a wall of road going vertically into the air. Well, it's actually the town bridge, and sometimes you can be going along all of a sudden, up goes the bridge because the ship has to go through, and your way is blocked. And I suppose in a kind of sideways kind of thinking, this morning I want to consider what it's like to be able to be on one side. You want to get to the other side, but you can't get there. Something has stopped you. So we'll give that some consideration in a short while. Just continuing that thought actually before I go to a scripture and the other consideration I was going to talk about. You can probably see the ship going through there. It's a massive vessel. I don't know if it's some sort of fishing vessel or dredger or I don't know what. Has all this incredible technology on the top of it, and just about to make its way out into the open sea. And once that passes, oh, here comes another one. Once they pass, then our way is clear. No obstacles in the way. But sometimes I think we put our own obstacles in the way of things, and we bring about judgment upon ourselves. And this morning I want to share a dream with you actually, and see what you think. I feel the Lord gave me an interpretation, and I'll share a short scripture with you, and we'll see what comes of that. Be with you soon. I've stopped again, and before I actually share a word with you, I want to show you a building. This was the old courthouse. It was the magistrates' court actually at one time. It's actually no longer in use. I think now the courts are held in Ipswich. But I suppose I wanted to be outside a building like this because, as I just said, I was thinking about judgment. And I suppose really, judgment is something we bring upon ourselves. Please excuse the traffic, I hope you can hear me. I once ended up in court when I was a young man. I stole a car. And it was a very silly thing to do. I was only 18, got involved with a friend, and we ended up in court, and I ended up on remand. Not a very pleasant experience actually, to have 2 weeks in a maximum security prison, which they put you in those days. I was only 18. But I can remember that moment before the magistrate when the case was heard, and they actually let me off. I think I've mentioned it before in another video. And I got away with 3 years sort of official care. They call it probation. But it was a lovely feeling to be released from the jail and to go outside and appreciate the fresh air again. It's out of interest, that building next door to it is the police station. So on the theme of judgment and condemnation, I'll share the dream with you in a moment when I get a nice quiet place to sit down. Well, I've stopped at the sea wall here actually, and I hope it's not too windy and that you can hear me. I'm just going to share the scripture with you, and then I'm going to share a dream. It's John chapter 3, verses 19 to 21. And this is the condemnation, that light is come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone that doeth evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. But he that doeth truth cometh to the light, that his deeds may be made manifest, that they are wrought in God. I found a little sheltered spot here. I'm actually at the most easterly point in England again. It's called Ness Point. So as I said, I was going to share a dream with you. It was one of those short dreams that I often get just as I'm going to sleep, and then I find myself waking up about 15 minutes after I've gone to sleep, and I've had this lucid dream. I dreamt that I stopped behind a car, and it was a black car. It was one of these, for those of you that are in the UK and are of my sort of vintage, will remember the Austin Somerset. And it's quite strange. I remember my stepfather had one of those cars. Anyway, this man pulled up in this Austin Somerset, this black old car, 1950s one, I think. And I can remember his face distinctly. He had large horn-rimmed glasses and a long beard. And he had a couple of children with him. He got out of the car, and I remember thinking to myself before he pulled up that it was actually quite dark, almost dark, and he never had any car lights on. And something inside me said, you must go and warn him. He can't just drive a car without having car lights on. I mean, he'd come to a stop, but I'd noticed that he hadn't had any lights on. So I said, excuse me, and he was about to walk up the pathway to his house. And he looked round, and I said, you didn't have any lights on when you drove up here. And he looked at me so hostile. And I just had the sense that he was saying to me, look, mind your own business. And I just felt that he was ignoring me, wanted to sort of, almost, I felt sort of quite intimidated, really. And he looked at me and he just walked on. And he ignored what I had to say. And I just thought, how very strange, what does that mean? And a thought came to my mind that when you're faced with something or somebody warns you about something and you take no notice, then the consequences are upon yourself. And thinking back to that scripture in John 3, I thought of these words, verdict and judgment. As you saw there, we were looking at the old courthouse. And of course, that's where the verdicts are given. And that's where the judgments are made. And the reason why I think we often allow ourselves to get into a situation where we're judged for having done something wrong, and often it's our own fault. And 3 words came to me, actually. So we have verdict and judgment. And then this came to me. Because, therefore, and consequence. We're judged by the things that we choose to do, and then there are consequences. And that man, I don't know whether outside of the dream, whether he was possibly careless or just ignorant about not putting lights on his car, but I just had that sense that I had to say something, and he would have to pay the price for driving like that. As I said, the man in the dream seemed hostile. And very often it's the way we are, the way we behave, that gets us into a kind of a selfish mindset. We don't want to accept the truth about something. So we choose to believe a lie. Oh, it doesn't matter, I can drive, I can see quite clearly, I don't need to have lights on at the moment. And I suppose in a way I was thinking about other things that are happening in the world at the moment. The vaccine, for instance, how many people took it without question, without thinking. They made choices. And when you make choices, you end up with consequences. And for me, when I stole that car as a young man, I paid a price. It wasn't a large price, but it was big enough to stop me making further mistakes in the future. And possibly, I was thinking also about that man in the dream. He didn't like the fact that I pulled him up on the fact that he didn't have lights. And some people don't like to be told things. They don't like to be warned. They don't like to hear the alternatives. I'd rather go on in the status quo. But we know, don't we, that we as Christians, we can see the world is rapidly changing. It's out of interest. I'm looking here at the what was one of the largest wind turbines in the UK. They call it Gulliver. And as you can see, there isn't much wind and the thing is standing still. And of course, choices are being made, aren't they, in the world? And those choices are having consequences upon people's lives. And because they want to go and build more and more of these things and turn away from original forms of energy, we're going to have to pay a price for what man wants to do. And so effectively we bring judgment upon ourselves. We bring condemnation upon ourselves. And thinking back to that scripture, men chose darkness rather than light. That man preferred to be in the dark. He probably thought that everything was fine. But it wasn't. And of course he had children with him in the dream, so he was putting the children at risk. This is often what happens, isn't it? We do things, but we don't realize that they have consequences and can affect other people. And those that we really care about can be put at risk. I know I'm rambling a bit this morning, but I just feel that we have to make the right choices, that we don't bring condemnation upon ourselves. People often say God is a cruel God, those that are outside Christ, to say that he's a cruel God, how can he judge people like that? But it's people that judge themselves. They condemn themselves by their own actions. And what are our actions today? We have to ask ourselves. So as we see the sun rise this morning, we see the light rising, and let's make that right choice today. If there's anything inside our hearts that's of any darkness, and perhaps somebody's warning us that we need to come into the light and expose it to the light so that it can be made manifest, as the scripture says, and that we can continue on the path of walking with Christ, especially in these last days as we see things coming to a climax. Have a blessed day.